from $340 billion in 2002. I remember when we talked about, gee, are we going to go over 100 billion? That was a big debate some years before that. 340 in 2002, 700 billion next year. So that's an enormous amount of money. And obviously you can't really separate, and that's for the military today. That's the tooth ratio. That's the fighting stuff that we're doing now and that John McCain says we must continue to do for up to 100 years. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. There's part of the problem right there. After all, we know that the top 5% don't want tax increases. They, in fact, want tax reductions, which, of course, Bush has given them for the last 8 years. And the middle class so-called person is paying a tax rate which is crushing. And so you just look at the dollars for a minute to be hard and cold about it, and you see, well, my God, where would we begin to do this kind of funding? So that's one very, very big problem we're facing. The Vets Hotline, the Pentagon's hotline just reported last week that their calls have increased 40% each year since 2004, and no one in this room would be surprised with that. Army reports on March 6th a new study out of veteran PTSD, the rates in those who are serving a third tour or fourth tour. Amazing, isn't it? Third or fourth tour, those rates are at a third now, reporting mental illness and/or PTSD. And we're talking about 1.3 million veterans that have already been home from these wars and are out. It's an incredible, mind-boggling number. 400,000. Mr. Martin mentioned 600,000. I was working with 400,000, but he's here in Washington, and he probably has a more accurate figure than I have. Let me just offer one little anecdote. I grew up in the town of Battle Creek, Michigan, famous for one thing, the production of Kellogg's Corn Flakes, until about 5 years ago, Bush's Secretary of Commerce, as president of Kellogg, figured out they could make the Corn Flakes along the border of Mexico. Who the hell needs a union and pensions and all that irrelevant crap? So the plant now is nothing but rubble. 5,000 jobs in Battle Creek gone, which is a familiar story, especially in the north and northeast. At any rate, Battle Creek was the home for many years of a very large and a very pleasant VA, mostly mental health facility. My mother worked there for 30 years as a music therapist. I know the place well. I used to go out there with my band, and we'd play to entertain the vets. That hospital at that time had over 3,000 beds in it. Today, that hospital has fewer than 600 beds. That's just one hospital. I'm not claiming I have extensive knowledge of the VA system, but it's very clear that over the last 20, 25 years, there's been real shrinkage of that whole system. So as Mr. Martin said again, you can only do so much with what you got, and then if the money that you have is being diverted illegally, then how much can you really hope to see an expansion of service? So that's a very, very tough problem. And I'm going to offer a little bit of hope here. There is a lawsuit that's been filed in California. Some of you may have heard about it, by the Vets for Common Sense. They've got some really good pro bono lawyers out there with the firm of Gordon Erstbommer, and they have sued the VA seeking a couple things. And one of them is a class action certification over the issue of treatment of post-traumatic stress, the very things that the Lucys and others are talking about. And it's very interesting in the pleadings. This is really the horse's mouth here talking. The VA, and I'll just give you one little cite from it. The VA lawyer argued for dismissal of this lawsuit. And in his argument, he said, Afghan and Iraq vets are not, quote, entitled to the 5 years of free health care that's been legislated, as you would call, after their return from combat. That's mandated by the Dignity for Wounded Warriors Act. But it's the old story. You get into the courtroom, you get into where the rubber really meets the road. This guy's in front of a federal judge fighting to kill this lawsuit. And he's saying, they're not entitled to that. We only have to provide such service, and this is the point about discretionary, as mandated, as is available under discretionary funding, which is available under the level of funding available to us. So essentially saying, Congress can pass a law saying that you have 5 years of care, but if Congress doesn't give us funds that are sufficient to provide that funding, sorry, bets are off. And so that's This is the VA at the top speaking. This is not some, oh, okay, thanks. This is not some guy down at the VA medical center somewhere. This is a top voice coming from the people that lead the VA. All right. This lawsuit, if it can be kept in court, and they're on the second phase of it now. They did win the first motion to dismiss. Now they're on the phase where they're trying to get class certification. If this happened, and believe me, even though I'm a lawyer, I have no illusions about the difficulties of these kind of battles, and we all in this room know that. But if this could be one, then it's possible. You may recall a number of years ago in the same San Francisco court, and let's face it, the reason they picked San Francisco, it's the only place in this country today, including my home city, New York, where you could hope to find a judge that would even begin to apply any kind of equity or justice to a case. And that's the fact, because it's the only place where there are any decent federal judges left. That's also pretty much the fact, with a few exceptions here or there. So this case could possibly lead to a settlement or some kind of court-structured mandate that would provide for care and actually make the VA begin to shift some of this discretionary funding. But it's still going to be the same problem until Congress steps up and begins to do that sort of thing and give the funding which is available. It's not, they're always going to have the argument of discretion. So those are big issues. And so I don't want to take much more time. I just want to say that I think that knowledge is a dangerous thing. Knowledge is an important thing. And I look driving in here this morning, and I look at these idiots out there on the road. A lot of those guys haven't seen a military uniform in a long time, I'll tell you that. No offense. But I just think, what are they doing out there? I mean, American flag, keep the war going, onward and upward. I mean, and here we are saying, listen, we all got to work together to fight this thing. And that's, in a way, typifies the problem we have. And Mr. Martin, again, alluded to this. Or, no, excuse me, Mr. Lucy, about the silence of the big three. Where are they on this? The Legion, the disabled American vets. Of all things, the disabled American vets, you can't even belong unless you have a VA disability rating. And third, of course, and the most over-the-top, VFW. And where are they on this? Where are they on this stuff? Where are they on this lawsuit in California? Why aren't they coming in as friend of the court on that brief? You know, that sort of thing. And so we all know there are reasons for that I won't go into, why they play the role they play, and where they've always played that role and all this stuff. And there has been some change over time. But knowledge is important. We need to know what these problems are and then take it from there. Congress is a slippery slope, as we all know. Anyone who's spent a couple of days over there lobbying knows what that's like. But we've got to keep our focus. We've got to fight, because the stories here are heartbreaking. And they're going to be more and more. And I'm going to wrap up with a phone call I got yesterday. I'm not going to play it for you because that would be a breach of their confidentiality. But it was a family in Missouri. And the woman's calling me in New York, and she says, we don't know what to do. She's breaking down on the phone. And she says, our son came home from Iraq. He did a year over there. He hasn't been able to settle down. We haven't been able. And she's desperately trying to understand what to do. And they've taken him to the VA, and they've taken him to other mental health care, and he won't stay, or they won't take him, all this stuff. And now he went on a rampage in the house, tore the house apart. The police come, and the family says he needs treatment. Don't just take him. And she says he's down in the county jail, and they say they're going to charge him criminally. This is, as we speak, as we sit here today, these are tragic, sad stories. And somehow we've got to rededicate ourselves to this fight, to this exposure of these problems, and to figuring out how we can use the legal system, the judicial system, of course, and the congressional pressures that we can build, and build a movement for this, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take an enormous effort, and we need to bring in many more allies and people that understand these problems. And with that, we have one thing for our side, and that is the truth of the injustice of these terrible experiences, and we need to fight knowing that truth and realize at the same time what we're facing. That's my